I think it's pretty safe to say that by far one of the big characters in the Star Wars franchise that are considered fan favorites are of course Luke Skywalker and Darth Sidious, also known as Emperor Palpatine. This is Mike Zero. Make sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel for future Star Wars content. Now, when we look at The Rise of Skywalker, we do know that this film is going to be very nostalgic. It's going to have a lot of callbacks to the originals and the prequels, and I think that by far the big component into the driving force of the hype of this movie is of course Palpatine's return and how Ian McDiarmid is portraying the role once more to end the Skywalker saga completely and in a satisfactory way for fans around the world. Now, these past couple of weeks or so, we've been learning a whole lot more about this film, and when it all comes down to one of the concept art descriptions, this is where things begin to get very exciting for Episode 9. Now, specifically, a description of a sequence based in the third act of the film, where it's described that both Rey and Kylo Ren are fighting the Dark Acolyte in a 2-on-1 lightsaber duel. This is where it's explained that as both Rey and Kylo duel Palpatine, who is controlling the Dark Acolyte, is when suddenly it's said that Luke's Force Ghost appears in the background, watching over the fight where Sidious is able to see Luke's apparition in the background. Now, this is where their saber duel is said to pause, where both Luke and Palpatine exchange powerful lines of dialogue that were done by Mark Hamill and Ian McDiarmid, and that George Lucas allowed the two to come up with their own lines for the sequence. The scene is said to serve as a reunion between both Palpatine and Sidious since Return of the Jedi, and that this is a scene in which Luke's Force Ghost and Palpatine's Sith Wraith begin to confront each other, which eventually leads to a sequence in which Luke's Force Ghost eventually is able to use a new force power that allows him to absorb the power of Palpatine's Sith spirit, where a trail of red energy is said to flow out of the Dark Acolyte's chest and into Luke's Force Ghost body, which is said to cause Luke to become more transparent. However, it weakens Palpatine's Sith spirit before taking over Kylo's body. The sequence is said to have a dedicated score to both Luke and Palpatine by John Williams that will play over that very given scene. So let's go over a couple of parts about this. Now, what I love so much about this is that this is a surreal moment in which we are finally going to have a reunion between both Luke and, of course, Palpatine. Ever since Episode 6, chronologically speaking, that is 30 plus years ago in the Star Wars universe. That's a big time jump since Luke ever saw Palpatine, and even in the EU, it wasn't that long. In the expanded universe, there was only a 6-year time jump in which Luke never saw Palpatine again. And that was in the Dark Empire comic line. It was roughly 6 years after Return of the Jedi. So, with that being said, this particular moment is said to actually be a scene that George Lucas allowed Ian McDiarmid and Mark Hamill to come up with their own lines of dialogue for this big scene between both Luke's Force Ghost and, of course, Palpatine's Sith Wraith. In case you guys don't know, that is the official term of Palpatine's new way to cheat death, is becoming a Sith Wraith. However, I prefer saying Sith Spirit, but to each his own. Now, with that being said, we do know that Episode 9 is going to feature Palpatine's Sith Spirit in a sense where it's going to be an abstract form in red energy, and this is said to be a moment in which Luke Skywalker is said to use a brand new force power where he is able to absorb some of the energy from the spirit of Sidious, where a trail of red energy is said to extract from the Dark Acolyte's chest. Now, this is said to actually make Luke become more transparent. Now, does that necessarily mean that this weakens Luke's Force Ghost, or could this very well be a sign that perhaps maybe Luke Skywalker is becoming more powerful? I don't know. But one thing is for certain is that this does indeed weaken the spirit of Sidious before he travels into Kylo Ren's body as his new host. And it's one of the main reasons as to why, where one of the other leaks that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, that Kylo Ren is even able to break free eventually from Palpatine's Sith spirit, where Rey is reminding him about his parents Han and Leia. So, the other piece that I do want to go over is the fact that George allowed both Mark Hamill and Ian McDiarmid to come up with their own lines of dialogue is very impressive. I think that that's a great thing. It's going to make the scene feel a lot more authentic, if you will. It's going to feel more in tune with the Star Wars franchise, and I think that it's going to work because we do know that Mark Hamill knows a lot about the character of Luke. In fact, his son knows about all the comics and everything related to the EU, so we do know that Episode 9 is going to feature a lot of callbacks to the EU, so one can only imagine what Mark Hamill came up with for new lines of dialogue for the character of Luke, and I cannot wait to see how much different Luke's character is going to be in comparison to that of The Last Jedi, as portrayed by Rian Johnson in his script. So, the last piece I really want to go over is that I can only imagine how visually stunning this is going to look, where you have a blue Force ghost of Luke going up against a red Sith Wraith/Spirit of Darth Sidious, also known as Emperor Palpatine. You can only imagine what it's going to look like on the big screen, especially in IMAX, since a great portion of this movie was shot in IMAX. So, I would love to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, do make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.